And there's lots of technical stuff too. I'm not a technophobe. Hello and welcome to this week's fretboard lesson. My name is Darryl Powis, and today we're going to look at 3 ways to make major scales sound less like scales. Now, if you've seen my video that I've done in the past on how to make minor scales sound less like scales, this is not duplicate content. This is different things that we can do. The other stuff applies too, but these are more interesting other ways that we can do things with major scales that'll apply on both too. So let's jump in and let's have a look at it. So first of all, what's the problem with playing scales straight up and down, or learning scales, or how your scales sound at the end of the day? Well, if you've been practicing scales for a while, what tends to happen is because we practice box shapes on the guitar, we end up, when it comes to improvising the sound of whatever we practice. So if you practice when it comes to actually playing an improvisation, I wouldn't be surprised if your improvisation kind of sounds like. Why? Because that's what you practice. So we've got to know the shapes. It is important. There's a learning curve for knowing the shapes, but we're here to make music. And I'm teaching this because I've done it myself. I am not exempt from all these problems that guitar players have. This is exactly what happened to me too. So what can we do? Well, there's a few ways that we're going to explore in this video today. So the first trick to making a major scale sound less like a scale and a little bit more like something which sounds good is to practice playing the scale and improvising with the scale on a single string first. Now I know I've said make scales sound less like scales by practicing scales. Stick with me because it will become slightly less confusing, I hope, in a second. So when you practice across strings, part of the problem is that because you're so in the technique of moving your hand across the strings, you get stuck in that motion. So one of the ways to get your ear to explore how you think scales should sound nice over a backing track, not about what I think they should sound like or what any other guitar players think they should sound like, is to go to the raw basic form of a single string scale and practice how that sounds over backing tracks first, or even not a backing track. Just try and make melodies that sound nice, because scales are there. They're a functional way of producing a melody. What scales are is like the alphabet, and melody and chords are like words and paragraphs and books, if we're taking an analogy over to literature. So you want to get accustomed with making melodies, not playing scales, for your musical ability. Should you not practice scales? No, of course you should practice scales. But if you're stuck with sounding like scales, there's a reason why. So give this a go. So an example is if I take the G string and I've got my G major scale. It lays out really nicely. G major, it's only got an F sharp in it, or you can think of it as 0, 2, 4, 5, 7, 9, 11, 12. You want to be able to play that scale up and down and make nice melodies just on it. So even the Sound of Music is making it into my video today. So okay, some dodgy little notes in there as I play it, but it's a melody that climbs up a scale. And there's all sorts of other melodies that can be played with any scale. And so when you're acclimatizing yourself to playing a scale, you should try and play with melodies on it on a single string, not memorizing it across the guitar. When you start crossing the strings, or playing across the strings is great, but I think you'll only ever sound as good as you do on a single string. Like you'll never rise above in your cross string playing what you can do on a single string with your melodic improvisation and playing. So if you're struggling to sound melodic in your playing, if you think that it just sounds like scales, play on a single string. And what it encourages you to do is what I'm going to say is number 2. So the second way to make your scales, your major scales, sound less like scales is with phrasing. Now, phrasing is a huge topic. You have the micro minutiae of vibrato, hammer-ons, pull-offs, all those technical sides to phrasing. And then you have this whole other side of phrasing that's how the rhythmic phrases sit together, the creation of phrases. But I don't want you to think too much as you're doing this about those. You can observe what's happening in your playing. But what happens when you try and play on a single string is you've only got those. You're very exposed, and you will automatically begin observing what's happening in your phrasing, whether that's something you like or something you don't like. But you can't hide behind playing lots of notes. So because it exposes those things, it's going to encourage you to improve your phrasing ability. And I want you just to observe what happens in your phrasing, and also observe your favorite guitar players, what happens in their phrasing. Hopefully you're learning songs too and not just practicing scales all the time. And so you should be noticing that when guitar players play solos, they don't just play rhythm and scales. They have phrasing, both the minutiae of the phrasing elements, and they have the phrasing of what's those rhythmic lines are looking like. And so observe as you improvise. And the more you observe, and the more you observe the players you like, the connection will start to happen. You'll start going, oh, that's interesting. And there's lots of technical stuff too. I'm not a technophobe. I don't know if I've ever used that term for guitar before. A technical phobe. I'm not sure if that's right. But I'm not saying that technique is a bad thing. Absolutely. I love having the right technique. I love technique practice. But when it comes to making music, if you get a bit too heady with your brain trying to think about scale patterns and shapes, you will lose some sense of the melodic phrasing that's going on and the rhythmic phrasing. So you should just be observing on a single string what's happening with your playing. Stick a backing track on, pick a key, be able to play on a single string and observe phrasing, phrases, and then listen to your favorite guitar players too. All right. Number 3. So the third way to stop making your scales sound like scales when you're improvising is to actually think about chords. So when you are playing on a song, you're not playing over a scale. You're playing over a chord at one time, which may be in a scale. The song may be in a key, but at any one time, you're playing over a chord. So that chord, if we're in G, it might be the G chord. It might be the A minor chord, which is also in the same key. It might be the B minor chord. These are all chords in the key of G. So as you're playing and practicing, this is a practice tool, if you like, try and think, oh, where are my notes from that chord? So an example here, if I'm playing the G major scale, it would be nice to be able to highlight, as I'm playing through the scale, what the notes of the G major chord are and be aware of them on the guitar. So my G major chord, I added in a few extra notes there, a fourth and a second. My G major chord, I can see, and in fact, if you know your bar chord, your 6-string bar chord, it's right there, and you know your major scale around it, then you can hit the notes from that chord as you pass through them. So being able to visualize it. So instead of trying to play through the scale lots, see how I'm landing on notes from the chord? And then I could go, okay, well, I'm going to play the same scale, but another chord from that key. Now, at this point, I've done a whole other video on how to work out chords in keys, and I'll post a link to it below. It's like a a long session. But chord number 4 in the key of G is a C major chord, which is right below it here. I have a C in a 5th string bar chord shape. So if you know your bar chords, I've got a C chord right there. I can play the G major scale, but hit the notes from the C chord. Still on the G chord here. Now I'm going to go to C. Can you hear how it changed? It sounds like I'm playing on a C chord, even though the notes I'm playing are still in the key of G. Because I'm landing on those. Now if I go back to G, hear it change. Back to C. And G. Cool, so that's 3 ways you can make your major scales sound less like scales. Remember, it's all just practice and all observing your own playing. It will come together over time. So take it easy and just work through the exercise and observe. Are you kind of capable of working on those things in your playing? Hit subscribe because I'm going to make more videos on how to do the same things that we've been doing here, but in more detail so that you can get it really under your fingers and into your playing. I will see you next week. I do videos every Thursday and Saturday. Thanks very much. See you then.